everyone. This is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee. And we want to welcome you to our fourth and final episode of this month in honor of the upcoming holiday, Christmas. Now, over the past few episodes, we have discussed a variety of topics, mostly relegated to Christmas traditions, their origins, history, original practices, as opposed to how they were observed or how they are observed today. In fact, we even went so far as to discuss the origins, if you will, of a particular jolly old fat man who is known to be one of the greatest gift givers of all time. But interestingly, when we started to discuss and dissect him, we found out that he was based more upon myth than he was fact. However, in today's episode, we are going to discuss the greatest gift giver of all time. And in my humble opinion, well, this is not fiction. This is 100% truth. A truth that shall set you free. Now, before we go into today's episode, I will say as a disclaimer, this is not me trying to preach, this is not me trying to convert or convince you of something one way or the other. And if you are going to disagree with me or anybody else, whether it be in the comments or personally, then all I will ask of you is to please keep it civil. I think that's a pretty fair trade. Now, I also understand that when I broached the topic of doing this episode for today, that there was a bit of pushback. And some people would say this is not a separation of church and state. Well, I say to that I will not deny the man who would deny me in front of the Father. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, hopefully you'll applaud, but otherwise, this is what it is. I'm going to do it 100%. Let the chips fall where they may, because I am unashamed about what I'm going to talk about today. Now, today we are going to, as I said, tell you the story of the greatest gift giver known to man. And this story is one that is told, one that it has been told a number of times. In fact, it's told typically around this time of year, mostly. And unfortunately, some people seem to take that story for granted any other time of the year. But I think it's a story that needs to be constantly kept in our minds 365 days, 24/7. But this is the story of the Nativity. Now, I'm sure almost each and every one of you out there viewing knows the story of the Nativity in some way, shape, or form. Even if for whatever reason you've never heard the story of the Nativity, then you at least have a common image in mind of the baby Jesus being born in a manger surrounded by common stable animals. And then, of course, there's also an angel flitting over the stable. There is, the little drummer boy. Sorry, but not sorry. He was not there. He unlike Jesus, he was actually fiction. But, of course, there's also the image of the shepherds being there, and there's also the image of the wise men being there at the stable. But interestingly enough, that's not the case. And we are going to dive into that here in just a few moments' time. But to begin the story, we have to turn to the words of the good book, and we're going to begin by diving into Luke chapter 2. And yes, I will unashamedly admit I have these passages bookmarked, and I will also unashamedly admit that I am reading straight from the book this time instead of going off of a script, and like I do with the 99% of videos that I do. But so we begin in Luke chapter 2, verse 1, and it says, "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. And he went to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring good tidings unto you, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Saviour, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you, that ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And, excuse me. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known to us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things in her heart, and pondered them. Well, that is the origin story of the greatest gift giver, and the greatest gift ever given unto man. However, before we kind of dissect that a little bit, folks, I want you to just know that, or just think back to what I just read, that there is no mention of the wise men or the magi in this particular passage. And that is for the fact of the matter that despite the common imagery in pop culture, or as we think of it today, the wise men were not present at the stable. And you'll find out here in just a moment that that is to be proven true. But before we dive into the next passage, which I will read from, I will say this first and foremost. There is a verse in Matthew chapter 2 which says that Herod was sore afraid when he heard that there were these magi coming out of the east into his land. Well, as a king, he's obviously going to worry about strangers to a foreign land, but also, despite the common misconception that there were only 3 wise men based upon the 3 gifts that were given to the baby Jesus, well, people don't understand that the Magi was basically a huge plethora of wise men and camp followers, people who would set up your camp, break it down, pack it up, people who would cook for you, so on and so forth. So this approach of the Magi coming into Israel actually looked more similar to the approach of an invading army than it would the nice little depiction we see in the movies and Christmas cards today, which is that of 3 silhouetted wise men riding across the desert on their camels, wandering about looking as if they're lost, like they took a wrong turn in Albuquerque. But that is certainly not the case, and we're going to discuss them here in just a moment. So we begin in Matthew chapter 2. And it says here, beginning in verse 1, that Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Huh? See, I told you, he was troubled, and rightfully so. He didn't know what their purpose was. But then when they were brought before the king, it says here, Herod had, in verse 4, Herod had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, and he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet Isaiah. And then we go into verse 6 here. It says, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, he inquired of them diligently as to what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. Well, for any of you biblical scholars out there, I'll say you probably already know what would happen with Herod's particular request. But for those of you who don't know, he did not intend to go worship Jesus. As a matter of fact, Jesus narrowly escaped, which shows you just how infallible the prophecies and words given by God are. Because as soon as the wise men left, Joseph received a dream that night, which alerted him to the danger, and he took Mary and the baby Jesus into the land of Egypt, and they stayed there until this particular King Herod had passed away and the danger was gone. And then they returned to the land of Israel. But it says here in verse 9 that when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And then when they were come into the house, mind you, the house, not the stable. Told you. But it says, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now I want to tell you all that because the Magi group was of such a large number, it was more than just a little bottle of myrrh, frankincense, and a satchel of gold. Basically, without trying to be blasphemous or sacrilegious, Joseph, Jesus, and Mary, after they received all the gifts from the Magi, they were loaded. And even though Joseph was a carpenter, which is a pretty lucrative position to be in as far as a job goes, especially at that time, well, he would have never had to work again unless he wanted to. So they weren't worrying about money for the rest of their lives. But despite that, after it mentions the bringing of the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, it also says here in verse 12 that, and being warned of God in a dream, that they should not return to Herod, they departed unto their own country another way. Now, of course, the passage from Matthew chapter 2 goes on to mention the dream that Joseph had where the angel warned him about the impending danger and their evacuation into the land of Egypt, which actually does fulfill biblical prophecy. But I'm not going to dive into all that. But what I will say, folks, is hate me or love me, this, in my opinion, is the greatest story ever told. It must needs be told on a regular basis, not just once a year. And we must always bear that in mind. Because when we go back to this one particular verse, I believe verse 11 of Matthew chapter 2, it talks about the giving of gifts. And that is one of the main things that Christmas is associated with, the giving of gifts. But I will say that when we observe this practice today of giving gifts to each other, we give the greatest gift of all, and that gift is called love. And I think that is most exemplified in this passage here, because when Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who is also the Father incarnate, came down to earth and submitted himself to being a humble human being, he gave the greatest gift of all. Not just love, but also a gift that he would give about 32 to 33 years later, and that is the gift of salvation. Because he made a way for each and every one of us to come to the Father through him. And there is no other way to obtain that gift. But I think that for that man to submit himself and subject himself to all that he went through, well, that's quite a gift. And I find it very hard to refuse. But I've already taken enough time out of your day. Again, this is not for me to preach or convert, and I do apologize if I got a little bit worked up. Obviously, this is my predilection. This is my conviction. I am just telling you the story as it is. I'm not going to preach to you. And if you have a problem with me, please message me personally. Don't spread it all over the channel. But with that being said, folks, I know that you're getting ready to celebrate Christmas tomorrow, and I thoroughly hope you enjoy it and enjoy your gifts and your time spent with family. And I thank you for actually taking the time out of your day on Christmas Eve to watch our video. If you haven't already, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, as well as click the bell icon so you'll never miss an upload. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of your hair for right now, because well, you got a lot more to worry about than listening to an old fogey ramble on about certain things. So until our next episode, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum, signing off for now, saying goodbye and God bless.